You are looking live. Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law. You have been read your Miranda rights, ladies. Good thing I didn't say your names out loud. You'd be in trouble.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Say hello, Johnny. All your fans are waiting for you to say hello. It'd be cool for you, Sean. You don't think Johnny's watching?
No, Sean.
My kid is gone.
Okay, here we go. The unelected president. Tell me how far we got.
Saigon Falls.
And we watched the video, right?
No,
Seriously?
we did not.
We are not.
Okay, lights please.
Wow. Now.
1974, North Vietnamese troops had violated the Paris Peace Agreement and renewed their assault on the site. It was clear the Republic of Vietnam would fall. In April of 75, North Vietnamese troops approached the southern capital of Saigon. President Gerald Ford ordered all U.S. troops and citizens out of the country.
Permit the movement of refugees to the area of their choice.
And on April 29th, Armed Forces Radio began playing White Christmas to signal an evacuation was underway. Captain Gerald Barrett was assigned to rescue U.S. Ambassador Graham Martin. The mission evolved into an 18-hour day of shuttling people to an armada of ships waiting in the South China Sea. And as Barry flew toward the U.S. Embassy in Saigon, he could see enemy tanks approaching the city.
So I ran behind the embassy and said, I'm here to get the ambassador. Because I'm thinking somebody told him I was coming to get him. Well, then somebody else gets on the phone as well. The ambassador isn't coming. Well, really? So I'm supposed to get him. No, he's not. So take a lift of these. So they loaded Vietnamese on.
In the early hours of April 30th, despite multiple flights with hundreds of evacuees and with time running out, Barry uttered 3 words that meant it was imperative for the U.S. diplomat to leave.
I'm not leaving the roof until the ambassador's on board. And out of nowhere, I said the president's sentence. 2 minutes later, the ambassador's up with his whole staff to come out. That's all we needed. Probably needed. I could have said that at 12 in the afternoon. So he comes up, gets on, we fly out with the ambassador, and we make the call, tiger, that means the ambassador's out.
Personally, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that the United States of America is being humiliated in this leaving an area that we had come to defend, and we've been defeated. Yes, we've chosen to leave, but we've chosen to leave because it's no longer defendable with the resources that we have chosen to commit, and the limits that we have put on our involvement in South Vietnam.
We didn't watch that yesterday?
I'm really confused.
Second period.
Yeah, me too.
All right, what are you confused about?
Why were they pushing the helicopter for the water?
Good question. I don't know why that's in the video. I don't know. I'm guessing. What is it? Okay, Saigon is. We already said that the war was basically over in 1973, but we still had some troops there and advisors and our ambassador at the embassy was still there. South Vietnam over that 2-year period still existed as South Vietnam. But once we left, and we signed a peace accord, so there was a period of peace before the North said, you know what, forget that peace agreement we had, which communists want to do. We dealt with that the whole Cold War. That's why future President Ronald Reagan, one of his most famous quotes, the thing he's known for saying is, trust but, anybody know? Verify. So he learned from his predecessors and used this knowledge that you could talk to these communist governments like the Soviet Union and think you have an agreement, but they never abide by it. It's just kind of the way it is. America's not perfect, but America really does try to do the right thing for most of the time, right? We know that there's been times in our history where, for whatever reason, Americans do things that are really bad. But the leadership of America really, even when we fight wars, you see wars being fought, and like we can just go in and annihilate people, right? But we don't, and our enemies know that. Our enemies do things like, hey, you know what the Americans won't do? They would never bomb a school. They would never bomb a hospital. So you know what they do? They take over the schools and the hospitals as their headquarters because they know we would never do that because that's not our moral code. Where they would do it, and they think, we got them. They would never bomb a school or a hospital because that's just the way they deal. They don't think like us. They don't operate by the same code. Which, by the way, you're saying like, hey, I think I'm going to go into politics. It's the same thing in that arena. If you're on the right side of the aisle, if you're Christian conservative, you're led by the idea that you have to fight these, intellectual fight. You have to fight these battles first and foremost as a Christian. That you want people to know the truth, and you want people to seek the truth, and you want to do it in a way that you are debating and trying to get people to see things your way without the mean, hateful, where the other side, they don't really care about truth and love. They just want to win. And if you saw anything from yesterday, they carry signs around saying they just want to win. So, hey, we're going to stop this Supreme Court possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade, and one of their sayings is by any means necessary. I saw someone walking around yesterday with that sign. And interestingly, since I'm on this rant, almost a year and a half ago on January 6th, they're continuing all this hoopla about people walking through the Capitol. By the way, nobody had weapons. Walking through the Capitol, calling it some crazy, well, not since 1812, like the Capitol was taken. If you're going to take over a Capitol and have an insurrection against the government, you would probably take weapons and be violent. But outside of a few episodes of violence, there wasn't any. It's just people, hey, matter of fact, they were let in, which is a whole other story. I can't go on with that. But I was saying that to say this. Then you hear politicians yesterday, almost just, and they wanted to blame Trump for that whole thing, blatantly calling for violence if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade. But for some reason, they're allowed. They not only do it, and we don't, they're allowed to do it, and we're not. Even the hint of it. When I say we, I'm talking Christian conservative. And I say that because I know most of your parents. So I say we. So everything in that video, why, if it was the enemies taking our helicopters down, whether it was just showing how chaotic it was and how it was rushed, I don't know. But the point to leaving Saigon was we were done with the war in 73, but the North wasn't done with the war. They paused because they signed that agreement, and they decided, no, we're going to forget that peace agreement, and they went in and annihilated. And if you look more into it, like very viciously annihilated the South. Because you can imagine if you're from their perspective, which is of course the wrong perspective, they had spent what, if you go back to Dien Bien Phu, 20 years in this battle, and now it was time for them to just take all that revenge and obliterate the South Vietnamese army. So that's why you can say that America lost. But The American soldier didn't lose. The American soldier is still undefeated. I believe that. Our army, our military, still undefeated. Because, of course, North Vietnamese did not take over until we were gone militarily. Does that make sense? Saigon's the capital of the South. They remained the South for almost those 2 years. And then the North said, forget it. And they went in and now it's one Vietnam. Today it's 2 Koreas, but it's one Vietnam. Any other questions, comments on the fall of Saigon? That would have been something that would have been big news that day, all over the TVs. Videos of this chaotic evacuation. Moving on. Almost done already with Ford. Short time as president. Did I mention before that Ford his life was threatened? Assassination attempts. It actually happened twice. The one we're going to focus on must just been second period. We didn't talk about this. I'm feeling this deja vu feeling. On September 5th, 1975, there was a young lady, I use that term loosely. There was a young woman who was at an event that President Ford was at. It's probably campaigning for someone, maybe even himself a year out. But he's at this event. He's walking through the crowd, and everything's going well. Everybody's shaking his hand. Yay, it seems to be a very friendly crowd. And then suddenly some young woman steps up with a handgun and has it I think he said it would end up being 2 feet from him. So he's basically looking down the barrel of a gun. We found out later that the gun wasn't even loaded. But the person that did it was named Lynette Fromm. Her nickname was Squeaky. And I always feel like, well, we're almost making her famous by using her nickname, but everybody does. Does that make sense? Hey, she got what she wanted. She's now famous or infamous throughout American history because who's going to forget the name Squeaky, right? So Squeaky Fromm, who was a follower of a man named, see if anybody's heard of this name. Very evil person, late 60s, early 70s America. His name was Charles Manson. Anybody? You heard of him? When I was young, younger than you, unfortunately, I was exposed to these things, but there was a really scary movie called Helter Skelter. And it was based on the actual true events of this diabolical man who, for some reason, this happens periodically through history. How many have heard of the Jim Jones guy that led the people down to South America and they all drank poison? Okay, you heard of that? Okay, so picture a cult like that, not as big as Jim Jones, but a small little cult in California near Hollywood. And this guy had, and especially young ladies, and he had them all believing, basically, even to the point that he was Christ himself. That he was their teacher, their leader, their preacher, their brother, their father, you guys old enough to say lover. He was everything to them. Disgusting, right? And whatever he said they did, even to the point of, hey, you know what? Whatever he had against the vendetta against Hollywood, but here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to go to this Hollywood person's house, and we're just going to kill him, carve him up, literally carve him up. So this became a very famous thing in America, a very infamous thing. All over the news that I think it was 3 different residences and more than 3 actors, actresses that were just really brutally killed in Hollywood just because this Charles Manson guy got his followers to go and carry out the murders. She was part of this cult. She was never convicted, or I don't even know if she was part of the murders. And she's going to tell us in the video part of the reason she did what she did is because, again, these people are crazy. She felt guilty that all the other followers, all the other people of the Manson family were in prison, most of them, because, they were doing what needed to be done. And here she was living free. And she's like, well, this just isn't right. This won't do it. I'm not worthy of Charles's devotion or whatever. So I got to do something. I should be in jail too. Really crazy. So she takes an unloaded weapon and points it in the face of the president and gets life in prison. Well, she's out on parole, but she did get life in prison, even though it wasn't loaded. That's kind of something you don't do, right, Ben? Point a gun at the president. So Isaac was the only one that ever heard of Charles Manson. A couple other people. Really evil. When you see a picture of him, well, ladies, when you see a picture of him, you'll understand why she was so enamored by it. By the way, in the video, when you see the picture, I think he carved that in his own forehead. Kind of like, and I think I just saw the movie, and I have seen interviews of him in real life, but I think the whole point was he's trying to like tell the world that he was Jesus Christ. So he carves a cross in his own forehead. By the way, I can't recommend the movie Helter Skelter. It's disgusting.
September 1975, Sacramento.
No.
26-year-old Lynette Squeaky Fromm pointed a Colt .45 caliber pistol at then President Gerald Ford. The young woman pictured here as a member of Charles Manson's cult. But Fromm had a genteel past. She danced at the White House as a child and took drama classes with the late Phil Hartman as a teen. Jess Braven wrote a book about what drove her to join the cult.
Whenever she talks about anything Manson related, it's like talking to someone who is almost from another planet.
I fall in love with him continuously. According to Braven, she felt guilty.
Now tell me you can understand why she fell in love with him continuously, right? Oh my goodness. Anyway, here's this young girl who's growing up in a very affluent family, apparently, right? She's like been to the White House. How does that happen? It's kind of like you can introspectively take this in as a young person, 16 years old. Like at 16, maybe one time she was sitting probably in a really nice school and was dancing at the White House. And next thing you know, she's under the thumb, under mentally, the hypnotic, whatever it is, the power of this evil guy. How's that happen? Yeah.
It feels bad to call it the dummies guide to starting a cult, but there's like 8 steps I guess you can watch out for if you're the site that you can use them.
Okay.
Are for getting people to be in a cult, and I forget what they are.
Who taught you those?
Oh, I was watching a video once. I was trying to start a cult. I'm trying to start a cult.
No, but listen, you bring up a good thing that someone took the time to make a video like that as a warning to young people that, you meet somebody new. Hey, that looks like a nice person. They seem really smart. Oh, they're so nice. And next thing you know, you're following every word they say to the point of brutally killing. I try to block it from memory because I don't think I would watch it again. I was young when I watched it, but I think one of the Sharon Tate, I think, was pregnant and they carved into her belly, whatever the message was, some satanic thing. It was awful. Yes. Yes. There he is, a guy with that much power.
That other members of the Manson family went to prison for life and wanted to prove herself to them. That led her to become the first person in American history sentenced with the crime of attempting to assassinate a U.S. president. In a decades-old video released to the public for the first time Monday, the 38th President of the United States remembers the moment he first saw her. It was the first time a sitting president ever gave oral testimony in a criminal trial.
I noticed a person in the second or third row in a brightly colored dress who appeared to want to either shake hands or speak, or at least wanted to get closer to me. I stopped because I was gradually moving toward the state capitol, and that was my first impression of a person who had a dress on. I, of course, didn't know who it was.
Ford said there was a gun 2 feet away from him.
As I stopped, I saw a hand come through the crowd in the first row, and that was the only active gesture that I saw, but in the hand was a weapon.
Fromm didn't load a bullet into the chamber, and the Secret Service tackled her before she could fire a shot. Ford didn't remember whether the gun clicked or not, and that's why the defense called him to testify.
The whole purpose of that testimony was to cast doubt on the prosecution theory that she went there to kill him.
In a prison interview, she dodged the ultimate question.
I'm not saying I tried to take a shot. How do you take a shot without a shower in the chamber?
Ford lived another 31 years, passing just after Christmas in 2006. He was 93. 3 years later, Squeaky Fromm was released from federal prison. She's now 64 and living in upstate.
Strange days indeed. Questions, comments? Squeaky Fromm. Okay, hard times in America economically in the 70s. 1975, continuing hard times. It was 73, by the way, that the height of that oil embargo was going on. We talked about last week with people having to have, like, if your license plate was odd number, you could get gas this day. If your license plate was even number, you could get gas on that day. So we think the gas situation is bad now. 50 years ago, it was even worse. Now you're going to laugh, because I think there's a video coming up that shows the situation with the gas prices in 1970s compared to what we're dealing with. But for what the price was back then and what it was turning into, it was a big deal. It was a monumental thing for your grandparents when the price of gas, 50 cents a gallon? What is going on? Because I do clearly remember, I know I can see the sign. It was called Martin's gas station, corner of Indianola and Hillman. Don't go there. On the south side of Youngstown, 29 cents a gallon. I was probably like 7, so 72-ish. So with all these hard times, Americans are hurting, and the biggest city, the economic engine of America, New York City, is about to go bankrupt. New York City is in real trouble economically. So what have we learned? Americans have gotten very accustomed since 1930s, and then it happened again in the 60s, to the federal government stepping in and taking over. And there are some people that go into politics because they like that idea, that they're in control. Control is a key word in politics, power and control. They like the idea that, hey, yeah, we, Washington, we're the heroes. We'll come in and save the day. Forget what the Constitution says. Hey, we need this to happen right now. Well, Ford, being a Republican conservative, didn't want to do that. Hey, it's not because if the federal government spends all this money to bail out New York City, whose money is it? hello, the government doesn't have money unless they take it from the people, right? So the rest of the country is like, oh, New York City, you ran your city into the ground, and now you want us, Ohioans, to bail you out? So that's the opposite thinking of what we learned in the 30s and the 60s with FDR and LBJ. And Ford was like, no, I'm not doing it. And the headline from the New York Daily News that day came out and said, Ford to city, drop dead. Like, that was a huge headline. In fact, it's kind of weird we're doing this because my brother got me to watch this baseball documentary, and right in the middle of the baseball documentary, because it's about a team it's about a New York team, and that was in there. Like, hey, this was hard times in New York, and they put that headline in the documentary as well. It was a big deal. So now there's all this political division and debate, like, oh, Ford doesn't care. New York's very important for the whole economy of America. And Ford saying, he didn't say drop dead, but Ford saying, no, we're not going to bail you out. And their version was drop dead. Now, the weird thing is, a month later, he ends up requesting Congress for the money. So his initial reaction was, no, the federal government's not bailing you out. So whether a month later political pressure got to him or the financial situation in New York got so much worse, whatever the reason, he ends up getting $2.3 billion to help New York. What would that be today? Probably closer to like 60. Anybody ever heard of the Concorde supersonic jet? No, you guys are growing up with Elon Musk sending people into space, right? A regular entrepreneur doing that. This was big news when I was a kid. I was probably 6th grade or so, 7th grade maybe, and the big news was passengers rode on a supersonic jet, and it took, I think, like maybe less than 3 hours to get from New York across the pond to Great Britain. That was big news. Supersonic, of course, means faster than speed of sound. What is speed of sound? Ooh. Come on, science students. What? What's the speed of light? You guys got memorize those kind of things?
Nope. 3,000.
No. 186,000 miles per second. Speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. Speed of sound is 746 miles per hour. So of course we can't travel the speed of light, or can we? 1.21 gigawatts. Unless we had 1.21 gigawatts. You guys don't know Back to the Future?
I understood that. There did.
Yeah.
Of course you did. You have savvy genius. Yeah. Why?
Big news again. Continuing with the space race, America, on the mission called Viking 1, first to put not a person, but make a Mars landing almost 50 years ago. Is it just me, or when you hear about all these things and you know that you're living in a very technological world and things change very quickly, I sit here and look back at this and I'm amazed that we aren't on Mars yet. Almost 50 years ago, we put a landing spacecraft on Mars. You understand what I'm saying? As quickly as everything's changing in the technology, I'm kind of surprised we're not there yet. Like, I really did think that by now we'd have, like Back to the Future hover cars and my favorite show when I was young. Anybody know the $6 Million Man? You do? Steve Austin, astronaut. You got to rebuild him. The Bionic Man. Anybody? You know him? Okay. Well, one of the things that was in the intro every time on that show was a guy had a jetpack on, standing there like this, and he had these, and it was, I forget exactly how it worked. It must have just been airflow or something. And he would fly around. And I was like 10, 9. This is almost 50 years ago. Why aren't we doing this? That was on that show almost 50 years ago. And I'm afraid of heights, so I didn't really realize I wouldn't do it now if I could. But I thought, like, for sure when I was older, we're all going to be flying around with jetpacks on wherever we want to go. It'd just be like a backpack, and you got the controls right there, and you fly around. I can't believe we're not there yet. Crazy.
We are there.
Hey, good news. Maybe Ford's idea to whip inflation now, it didn't work right away, but hey, maybe he was planting seeds and people finally got the hint, because inflation goes from 12.2% all the way down to 4.6% in a year and a half. Wouldn't that be great to see? Because the new numbers haven't come out yet, but I'm pretty sure we're pretty close to 12.2% inflation right now. And I think I might have told you yesterday that the news I'm hearing is we're supposed to be gearing up for it to get even worse. Because the two biggest things that affect your family and my family when it comes to inflation are gas prices and what's everybody need? Food. So there's this dire warning out there that food prices are really going to start to go up this summer because of what the farmers are having to deal with fuel prices, with fertilizer prices, and the trucking industry giving signs that, hey, things aren't moving like they were just not too many months ago, that going to the grocery store is going to be a pretty painful event. But inflation went down to 4.6%. What did we say was kind of normal? Anybody remember? What's a normal inflation rate? Remember how we talked about unemployment? Like, did we talk about that in here? Like, there's always going to be a certain level of unemployment, because someone could be like, hey, I'm not at this job and I'm going to this job and I'm taking a month off, so they're not even they're not employed at that time, so they become part of the number. But normal inflation is more like 3.6%. We're used to that. So when your grandparents are on Social Security every year, hopefully they get a slight increase in their benefits, because they have to, if they don't keep up with inflation, then their way of living is going to drop dramatically, right? So your grandparents did not get a 12% raise in their Social Security benefits. They only got like a 3% raise. And now they're dealing with double-digit inflation. So if you have great-grandparents or grandparents that live on Social Security, they're facing pretty hard times right now. Yeah.
If somebody like burned half the money and then just cut all the prices in half, that wouldn't actually help anything, would it?
Whose money they burn?
Everybody's? I don't know. Bank? Well, no.
The bank has.
I don't know. If everybody just mutually agreed.
Well, that would be pretty shocking. But to your point, one way you cut the money supply is to raise interest rates.
Good one, Isaac.
Raise interest rates. Point out, we'll buy that car.
I am. Oh, boy.
I wish Why? You know why we don't have a baseball game? Just when the fields were looking like we got the rest together.
Yeah. The 16th, 3 days ago. And then we go and like play also. And then we practice. Like the switch or not like. It was an unelected president.
Gerald?
I want to ask Kevin.
He became vice president because somebody resigned. And then he became president because the president resigned. So he was never elected for either one, but he became president. He's the only one. Yeah. Hi, Meredith. You want to come visit sometime?
Mr. Frank, I really not do something boring today.
How is it?